My name is Spencer, and at 53 years old, I thought I understood what Father's Day meant. I thought it was about family gathering around a table, sharing stories and celebrating the bond between a father and his children. Last Father's Day morning, I woke up with that familiar warmth in my chest, excited to see my daughter Sarah and my 2 grandchildren. I had no idea that within hours I would receive a phone call that would shatter everything I believed about family loyalty. That call would teach me that sometimes the people who push you away the hardest are the ones who need to learn the most painful lessons. Before I share this story with you, I want to know where you're watching from today. Please drop your state or country in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you believe every father deserves respect and dignity. Now let me tell you about the Father's Day that changed everything, and how sometimes being erased from the table is exactly what you need to reclaim your rightful place in your family's life. You know, looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I chose to ignore. My name is Spencer, and I've been a mechanical engineer for 30 years before I retired. 5 years ago, I lost my wife, Margaret, to cancer, and since then my daughter Sarah has been the center of my world. Well, Sarah and her 2 beautiful children, Emma, who's 6, and Lucas, who's 4. For 28 years, I watched Sarah grow from a curious little girl into a strong, independent woman. After her mother died, we became even closer. She would call me every other day, bring the kids over for weekend barbecues, and we had this tradition every Father's Day, where the whole family would gather at her house for a big celebration. But things started changing 3 years ago when Sarah married Derek Miller, a 30-year-old lawyer with perfectly styled hair and an even more perfectly calculated smile. From day one, I could tell Derek came from money. The way he carried himself, the expensive suits, the condescending way he would explain simple things to me, as if I hadn't spent 3 decades designing complex machinery. Derek grew up in one of those wealthy families where success was measured in dollar signs and social status. His father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, and Derek had never known what it meant to work for something truly meaningful. When he looked at me, I could see it in his eyes. He saw a blue-collar retiree who wasn't sophisticated enough for his new family. At first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Sarah loved him, and that was enough for me. I made every effort to include him in our family traditions, to treat him with respect, to welcome him into our tight-knit circle. But Derek had other plans. The changes started slowly. Sarah's phone calls became less frequent. When I would suggest family activities, Derek would always have some business commitment or social obligation that took priority. During family dinners, he would dominate conversations, steering them toward topics that made me feel excluded. Corporate law investment strategies, country club gossip, things that had nothing to do with the life I had built or the values I had raised Sarah with. I watched my daughter gradually become someone I barely recognized. The spontaneous, warm-hearted woman who used to laugh at my terrible jokes became more reserved, more careful with her words. She started apologizing for things that didn't need apologies, and I noticed she would glance at Derek before answering simple questions about her own life. The grandchildren were what kept me going through all of this. Emma and Lucas still lit up when they saw me still wanted to hear my stories about building bridges and fixing engines, but even my time with them became limited. Derek would always find reasons why they couldn't spend weekends with Grandpa anymore. Too much homework, too many scheduled activities, too many social commitments for children who were barely old enough to tie their own shoes. Last Father's Day was supposed to be different. Sarah had called the week before, and for a moment she sounded like her old self. She invited me for lunch, told me the kids were excited to see me, mentioned that she was making my favorite pot roast. I spent days picking out special gifts for Emma and Lucas, and I even bought a new shirt for the occasion. I should have known something was wrong when Sarah's voice carried a strange tension during that invitation call. But I was so hungry for normalcy, so desperate to believe that our family was healing, that I ignored the subtle warning signs. I convinced myself that Derek was finally accepting me, that we were all learning to coexist as one big, happy family. The phone rang at 8:30 in the morning on Father's Day. I was in the kitchen humming while I wrapped the presents for my grandchildren. Emma's gift was a beautiful wooden jewelry box I had crafted myself in my workshop, complete with tiny drawers and a mirror that reflected rainbow patterns when you opened it. For Lucas, I had built a miniature tool set, real tools, sized just right for his small hands, so he could help Grandpa with projects someday. When I saw Sarah's name on the caller ID, I smiled and answered with more enthusiasm than I had felt in months. "Good morning, sweetheart. Happy Father's Day to me, right?" But the voice that responded wasn't the warm, loving tone I expected. Sarah's words came out flat and rehearsed like she was reading from a script. "Dad, I need to talk to you about lunch today." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What about it, honey? I'm just finishing up the presents for the kids. I think they're going to love what I made for them." There was a long pause, and I could hear Derek's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. When Sarah spoke again, her voice sounded even more distant. "We've decided to make some changes to today's plans." "What kind of changes?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, even though alarm bells were going off in my head. "Derek and I have been talking, and we think it would be better if you didn't come to lunch today. We've cancelled your seat at the table." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to sit down on one of my kitchen chairs because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. "Cancelled my seat." "Sarah, what are you talking about?" "It's Father's Day." "I know what day it is, Dad. But Derek feels uncomfortable when you're here, and this is his home too now. We need to prioritize our immediate family's comfort and happiness." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my daughter, the little girl I had raised alone after her mother died, the woman I had walked down the aisle just 3 years ago. "Sarah, I don't understand. What did I do wrong? If Derek has a problem with me, we can talk about it like adults. It's not about what you did wrong, Dad. It's about what's best for our family moving forward. Derek thinks, and I agree, that we need some space to establish our own traditions without outside interference." Outside interference. The phrase felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had become outside interference in my own daughter's life. "Honey, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to spend Father's Day with my family. And Derek is my family now, Dad. He's Emma and Lucas's father figure, and his comfort matters too." Before I could respond, I heard Derek's voice clearly in the background. "Tell him, Sarah. Tell him what we agreed on." Sarah's next words will haunt me for the rest of my life. Her voice became even colder, more detached, as if she was forcing herself to say something that went against every instinct she had. "The real Father's Day gift for all of us would be your absence, Dad. We think it's time you learned to respect our boundaries and our new family dynamic." The silence that followed stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, could feel my hands starting to shake. "Sarah, please. Think about what you're saying. Think about Emma and Lucas. They're expecting to see their grandpa today. The children will be fine. Derek has planned special activities for them, and honestly, Dad, they're getting older now. They need to focus on their immediate family relationships, not get confused by too many adult figures trying to influence them. I tried one more time to reach the daughter I knew was still somewhere inside this stranger on the phone. "Sweetheart, I know you love Derek, and I respect that, but I'm your father. I raised you. I held you when you were scared. I taught you to drive. I walked you down the aisle. Doesn't that count for anything?" There was another pause, and when Sarah spoke again, I could hear tears in her voice, but her words remained firm. "Of course it counts, Dad. But that was then. This is now. Derek and I have made our decision, and I need you to respect it." Derek took the phone then, and his voice carried a smugness that made my blood boil. "Spencer, I think it's time you accepted that Sarah has a new life now. She doesn't need you managing her happiness anymore. Find something else to do today." The line went dead, and I sat there staring at my phone, surrounded by carefully wrapped presents and the lingering smell of the pot roast I thought my daughter was making for me. The silence in my house after that phone call was deafening. I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through new eyes. The refrigerator covered with drawings Emma and Lucas had made for me. The coffee mug Sarah had given me for Christmas with "World's Greatest Dad" printed in faded letters. The empty chair at my dining table where Margaret used to sit, and now the realization that even my daughter's chair might be empty forever. I spent the next hour walking through my house like a ghost, picking up photographs and remembering better times. There was Sarah at 5 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, beaming at me after I taught her to ride her bike. Sarah at 16, rolling her eyes at my overprotective questions about her first date. Sarah at 22, graduating from college with the business degree I had worked double shifts to pay for. Every memory felt like evidence of a life that no longer mattered. Had I been deluding myself all these years? Was I really just an interference in their perfect little family? My workshop called to me, and I found myself standing among the tools and half-finished projects that had been my refuge since Margaret died. This was where I had built Emma's jewelry box, where I had crafted Lucas's tool set. This was where I had spent countless hours creating things with my hands, the same way I had tried to build a relationship with Derek, through patience and understanding. The phone rang again, and for a moment my heart leaped thinking Sarah had come to her senses. But it was Harold, my old friend from the engineering firm, where we had worked together for 15 years. "Spencer, happy Father's Day, buddy. How's the family celebration going?" I couldn't bring myself to lie. Harold had been there through Margaret's illness, through the difficult early days of my retirement, through every major moment of my life for the past 2 decades. If I couldn't tell Harold the truth, who could I tell? They cancelled me. "Harold, Sarah called this morning and told me not to come. Said my absence would be the real Father's Day gift." The silence on Harold's end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "Are you telling me that your own daughter, the girl you raised single-handedly after Margaret passed, told you not to come to Father's Day lunch?" "Derek's idea, but Sarah went along with it. Said they need space to establish their own family traditions." Harold's response was swift and fierce. "That's garbage, Spencer, and you know it. That boy has been systematically isolating Sarah from you since the day they got married, and now he's succeeded in making her his accomplice." Maybe they're right, Harold. Maybe I have been interfering. Maybe I need to accept that Sarah has moved on. Don't you dare let them gaslight you into believing that nonsense. You know what happened to my son Kevin when his wife pulled the same manipulation tactics. I backed down, respected their boundaries, gave them space. You know how much space I got. 8 years, Spencer. 8 years before Kevin finally realized what his wife had done to our relationship. 8 years of missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed opportunities to know my grandchildren. Harold's words hit me hard because I remembered that painful period in his life. I had watched my strong, capable friend become a shadow of himself, always making excuses for why his son never called, never visited, never included him in important family moments. What changed? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Kevin's wife finally showed her true colors in a way he couldn't ignore anymore. She had been stealing money from Kevin's business account to fund her gambling addiction. When Kevin discovered it, he also discovered how she had been lying to him about me for years. All those times she told him I was too critical, too demanding, too old-fashioned. It was all manipulation to keep him isolated so she could control every aspect of his life. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Derek's subtle put-downs, his way of making me feel unwelcome in my own daughter's life, his insistence on expensive lifestyle choices that seemed designed to create distance between Sarah and her more modest roots. Harold, what if Derek is hiding something? What if there's more going on here than just his discomfort with having me around? Spencer, you're a smart man with good instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The question is, are you going to sit there and let this Derek character destroy your relationship with your daughter? Or are you going to fight for your family? After Harold hung up, I sat in my living room and really thought about Derek Miller for the first time. What did I actually know about this man who had convinced my daughter to erase me from their lives? He claimed to be a successful lawyer, but I had never seen him go to court or work late on important cases. He drove expensive cars and wore expensive clothes, but for a young lawyer just starting his career, his lifestyle seemed awfully lavish. Then I remembered something that had nagged at me during their wedding planning. Derek had insisted on being added to the trust fund I had established for Emma and Lucas. At the time, Sarah had explained it as a practical matter, something that would make it easier for Derek to handle emergencies or educational expenses for the children. I had agreed because I trusted Sarah's judgment and wanted to show Derek that I accepted him as part of the family. But what if that trust had been misplaced? What if Derek's real interest in my family wasn't love for Sarah, but access to the financial security I had worked my entire life to provide for my grandchildren? Monday morning, I drove to the office building where my old colleague Thomas Martinez now worked for the Internal Revenue Service. Thomas and I had maintained our friendship over the years, bonding over our shared experiences as single fathers and our love for classic cars. If anyone could help me understand Derek's financial situation, it was Thomas. Spencer, good to see you, though you look like hell. Rough Father's Day. I explained what had happened, watching Thomas's expression grow more serious with each detail. When I mentioned Derek's name and asked if Thomas could share any general information about tax issues that might affect young lawyers, his reaction was immediate and telling. Derek Miller, Spencer, I can't give you specific details about anyone's tax situation, but I can tell you this much. There's been a lot of chatter around the office about some high-profile tax evasion cases involving lawyers who have been living beyond their means. If your Derek Miller is the same Derek Miller, I'm thinking of your family might want to be very careful about any shared financial arrangements. The confirmation sent a chill through me, but I needed more information. Thomas suggested I speak with Patricia Williams, a friend of ours who worked at the same bank where Sarah and Derek held their accounts. Patricia had always been discreet and professional, but she was also a mother who understood the importance of protecting children's interests. When I met Patricia for coffee that afternoon, her face went pale the moment I mentioned Derek's name. "Spencer, I've been hoping someone from Derek's family would ask these questions. I can't violate client confidentiality, but I can share some general concerns about financial patterns I've been seeing lately." Patricia explained that she had noticed several red flags in recent months. Large cash deposits, followed by immediate withdrawals, multiple account transfers that seemed designed to obscure money trails, and most troubling activity in accounts that appeared to be connected to minor children's trust funds. "If I were you, Spencer, I would contact whoever manages your grandchildren's trust fund immediately, like today, right now." My heart was pounding as I drove straight to the office of Janet Morrison, the family attorney who had helped me establish the trust fund for Emma and Lucas after Margaret's death. That fund represented every penny I had saved, every sacrifice Margaret and I had made, every hope we had for our grandchildren's futures. $2 million carefully invested and protected, meant to pay for college educations, first homes, and a financial foundation for the next generation. Janet's secretary squeezed me in for an emergency appointment, and the moment Janet saw my face, she knew something was seriously wrong. "Spencer, what's going on? You look like someone died." "I think someone might have stolen from my grandchildren, Janet. I need you to check the trust fund account immediately. I need to know if Derek Miller has accessed any of the money." Janet's fingers flew over her computer keyboard, accessing the secure accounts and investment records. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When Janet finally looked up from her screen, her face was a mixture of anger and professional concern. "Spencer, sit down. We need to talk." The numbers Janet showed me were devastating. Over the past 18 months, Derek had made a series of withdrawals from the trust fund, always just under the amounts that would trigger automatic reviews. 50,000 here, 75,000 there, always with legitimate-sounding explanations. Educational enrichment programs, medical expenses, family emergency funds. $800,000. More than a third of my grandchildren's inheritance gone. "The worst part," Janet explained, "is that technically Derek had legal authority to make these withdrawals. When Sarah added him as a co-trustee, she gave him the same access rights that she had. Everything he did was technically within the bounds of the trust agreement." I felt like I was drowning. Not only had Derek manipulated my daughter into cutting me out of their lives, but he had systematically stolen from my grandchildren while doing it. The money wasn't just numbers on a page. It represented my life's work, Margaret's dreams for the future, and the security I had promised Emma and Lucas would always be there for them. "What can we do, Janet?" "How do we stop him?" "First, we freeze the account immediately. I can have that done within the hour. Second, we document everything. If Derek has been using this money for personal expenses rather than legitimate costs for the children, we might have grounds for criminal charges. Third, we need to involve law enforcement, because if Derek is stealing from his own stepchildren, he's probably stealing from other people too." That afternoon, Janet helped me contact Detective Robert Kane, a financial crimes investigator who specialized in white-collar theft and fraud. Detective Kane listened to our evidence with the focused attention of someone who had seen similar cases before. "Mr. Spencer, based on what you're telling me, this Derek Miller fits a very specific pattern we've been tracking. Young professionals who marry into families with money, gain access to financial accounts through marriage, and then systematically drain those accounts while maintaining a lifestyle that requires constant cash flow." Detective Kane had more devastating news. His preliminary investigation revealed that Derek was not just stealing from my grandchildren. He was under active investigation by both the IRS and the FBI for tax evasion, money laundering, and several other financial crimes. The expensive cars, the designer clothes, the lavish lifestyle Derek had been living was all funded by stolen money and unpaid taxes. We've been building a case against Mr. Miller for 6 months. Your trust fund situation might be exactly the evidence we need to move forward with arrests and indictments. I left Detective Kane's office with a mixture of rage and determination burning in my chest. Derek hadn't just manipulated my daughter and stolen from my grandchildren. He had turned my family into accomplices in his criminal enterprise, and he had made Sarah an unwitting participant in devastating her own children's futures. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. He had pushed me away just when I needed to be closest to my family. By erasing me from the table, he had freed me to discover his crimes and fight back without worrying about disrupting family harmony. There was no harmony left to disrupt. The following Sunday, exactly 1 week after the Father's Day, that changed everything, I drove to Sarah's house without calling ahead. It was time for Derek to face the consequences of his choices, and it was time for Sarah to learn the truth about the man she had chosen over her own father. Derek's BMW was in the driveway, and through the front window I could see him lounging in what used to be my favorite chair, reading a newspaper like he didn't have a care in the world. The sight of him sitting there so casually in the house where my daughter lived and my grandchildren played filled me with a cold fury I had never experienced before. Sarah answered the door with obvious surprise and immediate irritation. "Dad, what are you doing here? I thought we made it clear that you needed to respect our boundaries." "We need to talk, Sarah. All 3 of us. It's about Derek's business affairs and some irregularities that have come to light regarding the children's trust fund." Derek appeared behind Sarah, and for just a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes that looked like panic before his usual arrogant expression returned. "Spencer, you're not welcome here. Sarah asked you not to come, and I'm asking you to leave our property immediately." "Actually, Derek, I think you're going to want to hear what I have to say. It concerns $800,000 that has gone missing from my grandchildren's inheritance." The color drained from Derek's face so quickly I thought he might faint. Sarah looked confused, glancing between the 2 of us, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, what $800,000? I walked past both of them into the living room, the same room where we used to have family dinners, where I used to read stories to Emma and Lucas, where Derek had slowly and methodically poisoned my relationship with my own daughter. "Derek, I think you should explain to your wife how you've been funding your lifestyle for the past 1.5 years. Sarah, did you know that your husband has been withdrawing money from Emma and Lucas's trust fund? Money that was supposed to pay for their college educations." Derek's response was immediate and predictable. Attack mode. "You're delusional old man. I don't know what kind of fantasy you've cooked up, but you need to take your paranoid accusations and get out of our house." I pulled out the folder of documents Janet Morrison had prepared for me. Bank records, withdrawal statements, investment account summaries, all showing Derek's systematic theft from his own stepchildren. "Sarah, look at these papers. Look at the dates, the amounts, the explanations Derek provided for each withdrawal. Educational enrichment programs that don't exist, medical expenses for treatments that never happened, emergency funds for emergencies that were never emergencies." Sarah took the papers with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the evidence while Derek stood behind her, his face cycling through anger, panic, and calculation. "This has to be a mistake," Sarah whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "Derek wouldn't steal from the children. He loves Emma and Lucas." Derek tried a different approach, moving closer to Sarah, and speaking in the gentle, manipulative tone I had heard him use so many times before. Honey, your father is obviously having some kind of breakdown. He can't accept that you've moved on with your life, so now he's trying to cause problems between us with these ridiculous accusations. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone and showed Sarah the contact information for Detective Robert Kane. Sarah, your husband is under active investigation by the FBI for tax evasion, money laundering, and financial fraud. The trust fund theft is just the latest in a long pattern of criminal behavior. Derek's mask finally slipped completely. The charming, sophisticated lawyer disappeared, replaced by a cornered criminal who realized his carefully constructed life was collapsing. You have no proof of anything, Spencer. Those are just numbers on paper. I had every legal right to access that money for the children's benefit. Really? Derek. So Emma's cheerleading lessons cost $40,000. Lucas's preschool tuition required a $75,000 payment. What kind of educational enrichment program costs $50,000 for a 6-year-old? Sarah was staring at the documents, and I could see the exact moment when the reality of Derek's betrayal hit her. Her face went through the same progression Derek's had, and from confusion to horror to a deep, devastating understanding. Derek, these dates. These are the same weeks you bought the new car, when you paid for that vacation to Europe, when you bought the Rolex watch. You told me those were bonuses from work. Derek made one last, desperate attempt at manipulation. Sarah, baby, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. The law firm has been demanding higher performance. My parents have been cutting back their support. We needed money to maintain our lifestyle. I was going to pay it all back as soon as my career took off. But Sarah was no longer listening to his excuses. She was reading through Janet Morrison's analysis of the financial damage, understanding for the first time how thoroughly Derek had stolen her children's futures. "Get out," she said quietly. "Sarah, please, we can work this out. Your father is just trying to destroy our marriage because he's jealous of our happiness. Get out of my house, Derek. Get out now and don't come back." Derek's tone shifted one final time, becoming threatening and ugly. "You'll never see those kids again if you choose him over me, Sarah. I'll make sure of that. I'll fight you for custody. I'll tell the court you're an unfit mother who lets her crazy father manipulate her decisions." That was when I played my final card. I pulled out the small recording device Detective Kane had given me and showed Derek that our entire conversation had been recorded. "Actually, Derek, I think the court will be very interested in hearing how you just threatened to take children away from their mother as retaliation for discovering your theft." Derek stared at the recording device, and I watched the last of his fight drain away. He had been so focused on manipulating and controlling others that he had never considered the possibility that someone might be documenting his own behavior. "Sarah, I need you to understand something," I said, keeping my voice gentle despite the rage I felt. "Derek didn't just steal money from Emma and Lucas. He stole you from me. Every conversation where he made you feel guilty for calling me, every family event where he found an excuse not to include me, every boundary he convinced you to set between us. It was all designed to isolate you so he could have complete control over your family's resources." The next 48 hours moved with the speed and efficiency of long overdue justice. Derek was arrested at his law office on Tuesday morning, led away in handcuffs while his colleagues and clients watched in shock. The charges were extensive tax evasion, theft from a trust fund, money laundering, and fraud. Detective Kane later told me that Derek's arrest had opened the floodgates, with several other victims coming forward with similar stories of financial manipulation and theft. Sarah filed for divorce that same Tuesday, with Janet Morrison representing her interests and ensuring that Derek would have no further access to any family resources. The restraining order was approved within hours, legally preventing Derek from contacting Sarah or the children while the criminal case moved forward. But the legal victories, while satisfying, weren't what mattered most to me. What mattered was the conversation I had with Sarah that Tuesday evening, after Emma and Lucas had gone to bed, and we were alone in her living room for the first time in months. "Dad, I owe you an apology that I don't even know how to begin." Sarah's eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady and clear. The fog of Derek's manipulation was lifting, and I could see my real daughter emerging from the stranger she had become. "Honey, you don't owe me anything. You were being manipulated by someone who was very good at manipulation. Derek spent 3 years learning exactly how to control your thoughts and emotions. But I should have seen it, Dad. I should have recognized what he was doing. The way he talked about you, the way he always had reasons why we couldn't spend time with you, the way he made me feel guilty every time I wanted to call you or include you in our plans." Sarah told me about the gradual process of isolation Derek had orchestrated, how he had started with small criticisms about my outdated ideas and old-fashioned ways, how he had convinced her that I was too dependent on her attention, too needy for constant validation, how he had slowly but systematically reframed every expression of love and concern from me as manipulation and control. He made me believe that choosing him meant I had to choose against you, Dad. He convinced me that you and he could never coexist in the same family, and that for the sake of my marriage and my children's stability, I had to prioritize his comfort over our relationship. The most heartbreaking part of Sarah's explanation was learning how Derek had used Emma and Lucas as leverage in his manipulation. He had convinced Sarah that my influence on the children was confusing them, making it harder for them to accept him as their father figure. Every time I spent time with my grandchildren, Derek would find something to criticize about their behavior afterward, subtly blaming me for any problems or challenges. Derek made me believe that protecting my children meant protecting them from you, Dad. He convinced me that your old-fashioned values and outdated ideas were harmful to their development. I held my daughter while she cried, feeling the weight of 3 years of lost time and missed opportunities. But I also felt something else, pride. Sarah had found the courage to face the truth about Derek and make the hard choice to protect her children, even though it meant admitting she had been deceived and manipulated. Over the following weeks, we worked together to rebuild our relationship and repair the damage Derek had done to our family. Sarah moved the children into my house temporarily, while she looked for a new place to live, something more modest and affordable that she could manage on her own income. Emma and Lucas adjusted to Derek's absence with surprising resilience. Children are remarkably adaptable, and they seemed to sense that the tension and artificial atmosphere that had characterized their home life with Derek was finally gone. They were thrilled to have unlimited access to Grandpa again, and I loved having their laughter and energy filling my house. Sarah found a job with a non-profit organization that provided legal services to low-income families. The work paid less than what Derek's income had supported, but Sarah told me she had never felt more fulfilled or proud of what she was doing with her life. Derek's trial was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming, and his legal representation advised him to accept a plea deal rather than risk a longer sentence at trial. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution for all the money he had stolen, not just from our family, but from the several other victims who had come forward during the investigation. The most satisfying part of Derek's downfall was learning that his wealthy family had completely disowned him once his crimes became public. The parents who had always looked down on my working-class background wanted nothing to do with a son who had brought shame and criminal scandal to their social standing. Sarah and I established new traditions and boundaries that respected both our independence and our mutual love and support. She made it clear that while she valued my advice and wanted me to be an active part of her children's lives, she was committed to making her own decisions and building her own life. 1 year later, I found myself sitting at Sarah's dining room table on Father's Day morning, watching Emma carefully arrange flowers she had picked from the garden, while Lucas proudly displayed the card he had made for me in preschool. The card had a crayon drawing of a man with a big smile and the words, "I love you, Grandpa," written in shaky 4-year-old handwriting. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing the same pot roast she had planned to make the year before. But this time the invitation was genuine, and the welcome was warm. There was no Derek hovering in the background, no tension crackling through the air, no sense that I was an unwelcome intruder in my own family's celebration. The contrast with the previous year was so stark, it felt almost surreal. Instead of being erased from the table, I was sitting at the head of it, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world. Instead of receiving a phone call telling me my absence was a gift, I was receiving handmade cards and flower bouquets from grandchildren who were free to express their love without fear or confusion. Sarah brought the pot roast to the table, and for a moment our eyes met across the room. In that glance I saw gratitude, love, and a hard-earned wisdom that comes only from surviving betrayal and choosing forgiveness over bitterness. "Dad, before we eat, I want to say something," Sarah said, sitting down beside me. "I know I can never give you back the time we lost or erase the hurt I caused when I chose Derek's lies over your love. But I want you to know that losing you taught me something important about what family really means." Emma and Lucas listened with the patient attention children reserve for important adult moments they don't fully understand but recognize as significant. Real family doesn't ask you to choose between love and loyalty. Real family doesn't require you to diminish one relationship to strengthen another. Real family doesn't use guilt and manipulation to control your choices. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "You taught me that lesson by refusing to give up on us, even when I gave up on you. You fought for this family when I was too confused and manipulated to fight for it myself." The afternoon passed in the kind of easy, natural rhythm that had once been normal for us, but now felt precious and intentional. We played board games, worked in the garden, and sat on the front porch while the children rode their bicycles up and down the sidewalk. As the sun began to set, Sarah and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, while Emma and Lucas watched a movie in the living room. "Do you ever think about Derek?" I asked, not because I wanted to reopen old wounds, but because I was curious about how Sarah had processed everything that had happened. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with anger anymore. Mostly I think about how sad his life must be, to feel like he needed to steal and lie and manipulate people to be happy. I think about how empty he must have felt inside to believe that money and status were more important than genuine relationships." Sarah's perspective on Derek's motivations was more generous than mine, but I understood her need to find some way to make sense of how thoroughly she had been deceived by someone she had trusted and loved. I think Derek saw our family and wanted what we had, but he didn't understand that you can't steal love and loyalty. You have to earn them through honesty and consistency and genuine care for other people's well-being. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me about family forgiveness and the importance of fighting for what matters most. Derek's attempt to erase me from my family's life had ultimately failed because love and truth are stronger than manipulation and deceit. But more than that, being pushed away from the table had given me the freedom and motivation to discover Derek's crimes and protect my grandchildren's futures. If I had been included in that Father's Day lunch, I might never have questioned Derek's behavior or investigated his finances. Sarah's rejection had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for exposing the truth and saving our family from continued exploitation. Sometimes the people who try to diminish your place in the world end up proving exactly how important that place really is. Sometimes being erased from one table gives you the opportunity to build a better table where everyone has a permanent seat and no one has the power to cancel anyone else's place. The real Father's Day gift wasn't my absence, as Derek had convinced Sarah to believe. The real gift was learning that family bonds built on love and truth are strong enough to survive manipulation, betrayal, and even temporary rejection. The real gift was discovering that sometimes you have to be pushed away to find the strength to fight your way back home. Derek thought he was protecting his position by eliminating his competition for Sarah's loyalty. Instead, he had unleashed consequences he never prepared for: the determination of a father who refused to give up on his family, and the eventual revelation of his own criminal behavior that would destroy everything he had worked to build. If you've ever felt pushed aside by someone who seemed to have more influence over your loved ones, remember this truth has a way of surfacing, and genuine love has a way of surviving even the most sophisticated manipulation. Don't give up on the people who matter to you, even when they seem to have given up on you. Have you ever experienced something similar in your own family? Have you had to fight for your place at the table when someone tried to convince your loved ones that you didn't belong? Share your story in the comments below, and let's remind each other that family bonds are worth fighting for. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that love and truth are always stronger than lies and manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always find your way back to the table where you truly belong.